I'm a type A personality. And so relinquishing control of my man is something that I will admit is very challenging. I'm so type A. I like to have organization. I like to have a plan. I like to make sure that I can fit as much into that plan as possible. But ultimately, I'm seeing where I've probably ruined a lot of intimacy in my relationship, or I'm not experiencing the intimacy that I could because of that. Hello, beautiful ones, and welcome back to my channel. I hope that you have had a lovely week, and I hope that you are enjoying this book discussion series on The Empowered Wife by Laura Doyle. I have really enjoyed reading your comments in these comment sections of the videos I have posted so far and gathering your perspectives, and some of you have even shared some amazing advice and also backed up some of the things that Laura is teaching or just instructing on in this book. And so that's been really encouraging for me to see, to hear from other women who have found that these intimacy skills are making a difference in their marriage and in their level up journey. If we are just now meeting, my name is Leisha, and I've been documenting my personal level up journey here on YouTube since 2020. I have been typically sharing videos about my transformation from broke beachbum into feminine, elegant, and affluent woman. However, this year, to start 2023, I wanted to recenter on my relationship and continue to level up that area of my life because I am married, and I have been married now for almost 7 years. I just became a mother in 2021, or rather the very end of 2021. So really 2022 for me was all about my motherhood journey beginning. And with parenthood, you know, my relationship has come across some different dynamics. And so I'm very thrilled so far with what I have implemented from this book in my marriage in just such a short amount of time. I know that there's a lot more to come. So today I'm going to be continuing along with skill number 3. And if you haven't caught the previous videos, they'll be linked down in the description below for sure. I have a playlist that I've started so that you can easily watch them. Really quickly, before I dive into skill number 3 with you, I did want to say that Laura has a podcast, which I think could be so helpful for those of you who want some different perspectives. She interviews, from my understanding, a lot of different people on the podcast, and they talk about how these skills have been implemented in their lives and their relationships. And for me, I know that I really learn a lot from hearing from other people who are on the same path and who are sharing the journey with me. And also, I wanted to mention that The Empowered Wife does come in the audiobook format as well. And I think that the audiobooks for me, when I'm trying to take in information, I do love to listen to those when I'm walking or while I'm on the treadmill. However, I love to read a good hard copy book because I make notes in the pages, I highlight, and so that's something that really helps me to learn the information and help it apply to my personal circumstances and situations. So I just wanted to set you up with those thoughts, and now let's get into it. Okay, so skill number 3 is relinquish control of your man, and it is covered throughout chapters 13 through 17 of this book. I realized that my video last week was on the longer side. I think that was the longest video I've ever uploaded, and so I am going to be very, I think, precise with this skill because there are some highlights, and there's of course so much more information contained in the pages, and I want you to read the book for yourself. And I wanted to say that mainly because I realized that we are all strapped for time, especially those of us leveling up with children and jobs, and I do want to encourage you to read this book. Now, skill number 3, I wanted to say that for me, I'm a type A personality, okay? So all the type A's, raise your hands down in the comments below. That is me. And so relinquishing control of my man is something that I will admit is very challenging, especially for the reason of wanting to level up my life and having, I think, a very clear picture and goal in mind of where I would like to be in the next 5 years, in the next year. And that can be a challenge for someone who very much wants to involve my husband in that. And I want us to experience all the things that I envision together. I don't want to leave him behind. I have seen time and time again women who level up their life, level up their career, and the man gets left behind and they ultimately do end up divorcing, and that's really sad. And so if you did not catch the first video where I set up all the disclaimers and sort of intro this book, you'll miss out on some information about why I think that it's important to level up with your man and keep your marriage strong. So that is important to me. Even though I'm so type A, I like to have organization, I like to have a plan, I like to make sure that I can fit as much into that plan as possible. But ultimately, I'm seeing where I've probably ruined a lot of intimacy in my relationship, or I'm not experiencing the intimacy that I could because of that. So this has been a chapter for me that I know I will have to work a little bit harder at and become very aware of my tendency. And I say that just with vulnerability, without giving away, personal information about my marriage. I think that I'm realizing this is a very important area for me to transform myself in. And so let's start out here with skill number 3. I think that it's very important to understand the place where we should come from as far as we think, our thoughts work when we seek to give up some of the control in our relationship. And what Laura says is that all control is based in fear. And I agree with that 100%. I think that when we are trying to over control a situation or our life, our journey, where we want to go, we're really afraid of something. We're either afraid of missing out on what we want, or living a life that may be too painful because we're not getting what we want, or we're not experiencing life to the fullest. It can happen across all the different areas of life, right? Where we feel like we're not experiencing our fullest potential and we're missing out on things that we could have. For me, I do have a very long-term vision, and I tend to look a lot more at that versus the here and now. I can break down the steps that I need to get to that long-term vision, but I think I do get really focused on being afraid and having fear about not reaching that ultimate goal and missing out. And so I agree. The way that Laura describes removing that fear, I do feel like I can get to a place where I feel safe in that, for sure. In fact, I've already experimented with some of the things that she gives in this skill as a practical application, and I have felt very positively about that. Chapter 13 is called Stay on Your Own Paper. And I thought that this was such a good way to think about controlling the things that you can control versus what you can't about the person that you're in a relationship with. This just means to control the controllable things about your goals, your life, and make sure that you are respectful and grateful for what the other person is contributing, even though it may not be exactly what you want, or you're afraid it's not going to play out exactly how you want it to. This can also be a good illustration for those of us who compare our journeys and our lives to those that we aspire to be like. And for me, especially here on YouTube, I see so many women that I admire and whom I would love to emulate their success, but I realize that I need to stay on my own paper, I need to stay in my lane. And I think that comparison and that want to control someone else to a point, it takes away from our overall personal fulfillment. And that to me has become much more important than trying to emulate someone else. I have a lot of my own values, and my life is just different. All of us are unique, and we cannot simply just copy someone else or force someone else to be a full part of this picture we have in our own heads, right? When you feel like you need to control someone else, every little detail that they are, going through, it can be a sign that you need to focus on something within yourself that is wrong, right? Or that is maybe not serving you to the best of what your life could be. I think that that's so true, because I look at, or I notice that a lot of people who are quick to criticize others, they're quick to judge you. I think we definitely experience this at some point in our journeys to level up or become more elegant, become more affluent. Certainly, we do experience judgment, and people criticize us. And I think that it is because they see a weakness in themselves. They see something in you that they wish they had. And so as a way of dealing with that, instead of focusing on their own papers, they will focus on yours too much because it's easier. It is so much harder to look in the mirror at ourselves and to say, okay, I need to work on this about myself. I want to achieve this, but I need to do XYZ thing that is probably pretty difficult. It's more difficult than if I'm just distracted by what my coworker or my friend is doing over here, where I could just kind of criticize their life and point out what they need to improve, bring them down some way. You know, I think that it's really common, and I've seen a lot of other content about you on YouTube about this as well. So if you're going through that right now, I would encourage you to just take a look at it that way. Stay on your own paper. I think that's a really great piece of advice to get you started out on the awareness of your tendency to control your spouse in your marriage. So chapter 14 is titled, Is Communication Overrated? And this again is such a common thing when you talk about marriage, is that people say communication is key. So I just wonder though, is that really true? She says that there's not much to argue about once you give up the need to control everything. You can learn to advocate for your desires and your feelings in a way that is not disrespectful and that does not create more drama than is necessary. The more that he knows about what will make you happy, again, the happier you'll be. And in turn, he feels more successful as a husband and a man. Take your own happiness seriously. I talked about this in the first video where I mentioned self-care, and Laura is really trying to, again, bring that back to the focus of, if you're trying to control your husband to the point of, you know, creating arguments all of the time and a lot of disharmony in your marriage, think about your happiness and really try and go there, and remember, you create your own happiness. So the phrase "we need to talk," she mentions, needs to be removed from your vocabulary. And I agree with that. I think that when you approach your husband with the "we need to talk," or you try and schedule a time to communicate or discuss something that is probably a tough subject and he knows it, of course he's going to already have his defenses up and be ready to argue his position. And so I think this is very clever. My tendency in the past has been to say, hey, can we sit down, almost like having a business meeting like I used to do at work on projects, you know, we are going to sit down and have a working session about this, or we're going to make a decision today and the focus of this meeting is going to be this topic. You know, I think that everyone comes prepared, right? But in a relationship, the defenses come up. Think about that a little bit. If you are the kind, like I am, the type A type, to set up a time slot to have these very specific discussions about a controversy within your marriage, rethink that a little bit. Maybe that is something that you need to refrain from for a while, and that can be your experiment. It's something that I'm also taking back a notch. We do have our regular kind of spending plan meetings and that sort of thing, but I think we're going to take it back a notch and just see what happens. Chapter 15, I'm not going to go into detail in this chapter because it covers the top 10 ways to control your husband and why they don't work. So I think that it is very important to go through this list of things that you should be aware of and make sure that you avoid these things if possible. They are very common. I admit I have done every single one of those 10 things, and I can think of a time or an experience for each of them where it just didn't work out. It did not get me the result that I wanted. And so very beneficial to go through those and see how that impacts things. Now, there are 4 questions in this chapter that I am going to state for you here in the video. So that way you can take them with you to maybe a journal session. So again, this is from chapter 15. Write down and answer the question, what am I afraid of? Is my fear realistic? Can I actually control the situation? And is it worth the intimacy it would cost me to try to control? Now, that question number 4 has been a big one for me because I think I've thought of the other 3 as far as whenever I'm worried about a situation in my life and I'm worried, you know, it can be about anything. But that number 4 is very specific to your relationship, and it's something that you need to weigh. Is it worth the intimacy that I might lose if I am so, controlling to make sure that I get this outcome I want. Chapter 16 is get him to do more by doing less. The quote here really struck me because it says, women who seek equality with men lack ambition. And that's by Marilyn Monroe. And when I first read that, I was a little bit, I don't know, my guard came up of, I need to be careful what she says in this chapter, because I think for so long, I have been, especially in my career, I've been fighting to have my voice heard equally as a man's, for example. And as I read through this chapter, I realized that there's a different way to think about this, right? Of course, I want to achieve more by doing less. That is thinking smarter, not harder, right? So Laura says to jump on things less when you want things done, and that her husband picks up the slack more when she does this. This has been my experiment for the past week, where I have decided to let some things go. One of the things I remember thinking early on in my marriage was that I had to do all of the housework to have it done correctly. And I discovered that that is not the case. So something that she outlines here is to stop helping and stop doing things for your man that he could easily do himself, right? So she gives examples of, stop looking for his keys every time he says they're lost. Stop folding his laundry every time he throws them out on the bed and doesn't get them put away. So I do find that when I have let those things go, they do get done. And I don't necessarily ask for them to get done. My husband could easily do them for himself. It's the things that he couldn't do for himself where I step in to help that brings us closer. And so, if he's out somewhere and unable to get to something that he needs, and I maybe go meet him and bring it to him, that is where it's something that brings us closer, because I went out of my way, right? And he really needed me in that situation. So think of opportunities where you could practice that in the upcoming weeks, and let me know how it goes in the comment section. I would love to hear. Oftentimes, for me, I find it hard and difficult for myself because I will typically read more information, or I see myself reading more information or listening to more information that would help us, I think, with things related to finances perhaps, or bettering our careers. I don't see my husband doing that as much. And so I think that I know more. And I think that when we have a problem, that I know the solution. And that's just not true. I think that my husband, he is more than capable, obviously. He has an amazing job and he's able to solve problems with elegance. And she says in this chapter that, there is probably a more elegant solution your husband can come up with than you if you just let him handle it and that he let him step in to take care of it. I also practiced this past week using the phrase I can't instead of saying, would you please, do X, Y, Z. And for example, last night, we have had a really tough week here. We've had a lot of things going on with our family and our extended family, and it has been a big challenge. And so I came home yesterday and I just did not feel well at all. I was just beyond exhausted. And after dinner, I really just did not feel like doing the dishes. And so I went to my husband and I said, I can't do the dishes tonight. I'm going to go lay down. That was it. I did not say, would you please do them? I did not say anything further than that. And I heard him pick up the dishes. And that meant a lot to me. It was so helpful. And I thought to myself, this is magic. There is something to what Laura is teaching us, I think, in the way that we can rephrase our asks and our desires to our husbands. And so I will continue to experiment with this. I have also implemented some of the phrases from the past skills that she teaches within the chapters, and they are also working for me to bring more intimacy into the relationship and less, disgruntlements, I guess. So there's something to this. Again, experiment and see how it goes for you. Finally, this is the last chapter in skill number 3. This is a really tough one. Your husband is better with money than you are. That is the title of this section. And she looks at the finances as a responsibility that you can relinquish to your husband. If you are like me, you have a hard time relinquishing control, this might be the final thing that you implement as part of every intimacy skill as a whole. Remember, there's 6 total. So you can come back to this. If you are not ready to relinquish your responsibilities that you have inside the finances of your marriage, come back to it. Just read through this chapter, take some notes, think about it a little bit, and come back to it, because I agree with her. This is probably the hardest thing to work on. So if you feel uncomfortable with it, just skip it, is what her words are. I think though that she's right in saying that one of the obvious benefits of giving up managing the finances is that you can use your newfound time for more self-care. 100%. I have spent so much time on finances, on learning how to improve my financial skills, learning how to manage investment accounts and how to invest for our child and plan for our retirement and all of that, you know. And so she says that trusting your husband on this level will take your intimacy to the next level. So level up your life, level up your relationship by relinquishing the financial responsibilities to your husband. Now, she's not saying here, do not save money in your own account. Do not make sure that you're covered in the case of, you know, a rainy day or something. She's not saying that at all. I think she's just saying to let him handle the responsibility of it all, basically. One of the examples she gives from a student that she's coached is, her student said, "I didn't think there was anything wrong with the way we were doing our finances before, but things are a lot better now that I relinquished that chore to my husband. Our relationship and finances have certainly improved since we did this." So I think there are some women out there who do experience the benefits of it for sure. One of the hardest things, I think, is, for the sake of time, I don't like to cut out information. But again, this might be one that I revisit in the end of the series. We've already sort of done this because I ended up taking a big step back from my career after I became a mother. And so we were doing a lot 50-50 in our finances and our marriage, and now we're really not. I still do pay some of the bills physically, but I am not taking on the overall management of our finances. One of the benefits for me in this has been that I've seen my husband become much more aware of the reality of where we are in our financial goals and our responsibilities. And so while at first I was very concerned and trying to control when we paid the bills and making sure that they were paid, you know, to meet our goals and all of that, I will say that now I have started to improve upon a lot of this, and I need to experiment some more with it for sure. But this has, I think, affected my relationship as far as finances go by having my husband step up a lot more, and this is improving, I think, in the long run, our prosperity. So again, I love my husband. Ultimately, what I want out of reading this book is to become closer and have a stronger, more loving and affectionate relationship than I already do. But I am seeing that for those of us who are on this level up journey, these skills, these intimacy skills, are going to help to create a marriage or just a relationship that is going to overall become more prosperous in the financial area. So again, great chapter. I could probably make one video on this chapter because I have gotten a lot of questions. There's also at the end another excerpt from a podcast where she's interviewing a man, and he's talking about his personal experience with his wife becoming more aware of the controlling aspect in their relationship. It is so good. So don't skip over this. Definitely read through it if you're not ready to commit to implementing it yet, and let me know what you think down in the comments below. I'm going to wrap this up here. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me, for sharing in this book discussion. Again, I can't wait to be back with you next week where we talk about skill number 4. Until next time, bye.